In a quiet town called Umo, there lived a beautiful young woman named Ada. She was admired by everyone in the village. Men from far and wide came to ask for her hand in marriage. No one could deny her beauty. Her glowing skin, her radiant smile, and kind eyes made her the talk of the town. The village's cobblestone streets often buzzed with chatter about her, and even the elders admired her graceful demeanor. But no matter how many men asked her to marry them, Ada couldn't say yes. Instead, she preferred to spend time with them, only to send them away once she was done. It wasn't because she didn't want love. Ada had a deep secret, one she couldn't share with anyone except her two best friends, Rena and Sam. She trusted them completely and confided in them about her struggles. Ada had something inside her, something that made her feel restless. She couldn't spend a day without being with a man. It wasn't just one man. Sometimes it was even 10 in a single day. It wasn't because she wanted to, but because she had to. There was a fire inside her that she couldn't control. Since she was 16 years old, Ada had felt a strange burning in her body that made her feel restless. She started seeking out men to calm the fire, but no matter what she did, the feeling never went away. By the time she turned 24, the problem had grown worse. She had lost count of how many times she had sought help, but no one knew how to help her. Ada had slept with almost all the men in her town because she had a very high fire between her legs that needed to be constantly satisfied. The small, tight-knit community whispered behind her back, yet no one dared confront her. Ada was deeply ashamed. She had even paid men to be with her, just to ease the burning inside her, but nothing worked. Every night, she would lie in bed and cry, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, wondering why she was cursed with this terrible secret. She didn't want to live this way, but it seemed impossible to stop. Her parents were clueless about what was happening to their beautiful daughter. They often pressured her to get married, saying, "Ada, you are so beautiful. Why don't you settle down with a nice man?" But Ada couldn't tell them the truth. How could she explain that one man would never be enough for her? How could she marry when she needed many men every day? So, she kept her secret, telling her parents she wasn't ready for marriage, even though the real reason was far darker. One day, while walking out of a small cafe that was nestled at the edge of the marketplace, Ada bumped into a young man named Daniel. He was kind and gentle, with eyes that seemed to understand more than words could convey, and for the first time in her life, Ada felt something strange, something different. Her heart raced and her cheeks flushed. Daniel smiled at her and said, "No worries. Are you okay?" Ada nodded quickly, unable to speak. As Daniel offered her a ride home in his weathered but reliable old car, she found herself agreeing without hesitation. That night, after their chance meeting, Ada couldn't stop thinking about him. She felt something she hadn't felt before. Hope, maybe, just maybe, Daniel could be different. As days went by, Ada and Daniel grew closer. They spent more time together, walking along the peaceful trails of the nearby forest or sitting by the quiet lake just outside town. Soon enough, Daniel confessed his love for her. Ada was overjoyed. For the first time, she believed she could have a normal life. Maybe this love would take away her secret and the fire inside her would disappear. But it didn't. Even though Ada loved Daniel deeply, the burning desire didn't stop. She tried to hide it, but soon she found herself sneaking away to meet other men on a daily basis. She hated herself for it, but she couldn't resist the pull. The guilt ate away at her. Every time she was with Daniel, she felt like she was lying to him. She wanted to be faithful, but the fire was too strong in between her legs. One evening, Daniel surprised Ada with a proposal. He got down on one knee under the golden glow of the setting sun and asked, "Will you marry me?" Ada was shocked and said yes. She couldn't wait to share the news with her best friends, Raina and Sam. The three friends met at their usual spot the next day, a cozy corner of the town's central park. Ada proudly showed off her engagement ring, her smile wide and bright. Rena and Sam cheered for her, hugging her tightly and celebrating this big moment in her life. They drank and laughed, imagining the beautiful life Ada was about to have with Daniel. But deep inside, Rena felt something dark. She had always been in Ada's shadow. Rina had struggled to find love herself, and now she couldn't understand how Ada, who carried such a dark secret, could be the one to get everything. Rena felt bitter and jealous. How could someone who slept with so many men be rewarded with love and happiness while she, Rina, was left with nothing? Rena couldn't stop the jealousy from growing. It ate away at her until she came up with a plan to stop Ada's wedding. The big day arrived. Ada and Daniel were surrounded by friends and family, and the wedding hall was beautifully decorated with white lilies and shimmering lights. Everyone was excited to witness their love. But just as Ada and Daniel were about to exchange their rings, something strange happened. The large screen in the hall flickered, and a video started playing. It wasn't a sweet video of Ada and Daniel's journey together. No, it was something much worse. It was a video recording of Ada sleeping with different men. The guests gasped in shock as the sounds of their voices filled the room. Ada's secret was out for everyone to see. Daniel's face turned pale. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Ada stood frozen, her world crashing down around her. The whispers in the room grew louder, and Ada could feel the weight of everyone's judgments. Daniel didn't say a word. He walked out of the hall, leaving Ada behind. Ada ran after him, crying and begging him to listen, but it was too late. Daniel was too hurt. He drove away, leaving Ada standing there, broken and alone. Sam quickly rushed to Ada's side, helping her into a car and driving her home. Ada cried uncontrollably, staring out the window as the streets blurred past, wondering how her life had come to this. She knew her secret would destroy her, but she never thought it would happen this way. The days that followed were filled with pain and regrets. Ada's heart ached for Daniel, but she knew the hard truth was difficult to face. She couldn't live with her secret any longer. She needed help, real help, to deal with the fire inside. You must be wondering who had played that video on Ada's wedding day. It was Rena, her friend, the one she trusted with her secrets. Rena had actually taken a secret recording of Ada with other men and played it on the screen on her wedding day, just to end the marriage, all because of envy and jealousy. Ada didn't know Rena was involved. She still treated Rena like a friend and sister. Rena kept on putting fire into Daniel and Ada's relationship, seeking different ways to get Daniel's attention. She said to herself, "Since I have succeeded in destroying the relationship between Daniel and Ada, I think I can have Daniel to myself. Why would someone who is always sleeping with many men marry this handsome man and me?" Rena can't. I must get Daniel. She tried so hard, but it failed because Daniel wasn't interested in anything that had to do with Ada, let alone being with her friend. Ada, on the other hand, decided to seek professional help. She found a doctor who specialized in the disorder she had, and slowly, through therapy and treatment, she began to heal. It wasn't easy, but Ada knew she had to fight for her life. One day, after many months of healing, Ada received a letter from Daniel. In it, he told her that while he was hurt by what had happened, he still cared about her and wanted her to get better. He also went ahead to write that he later realized it wasn't Ada's fault, it was a health condition, and told her to call the phone number in the letter. Out of all excitement, Ada called Daniel through the phone number written in the letter, and they had a very lengthy conversation that led to a reconciliation. Daniel and Ada's relationship started all over again, and Daniel was ready to support Ada through her therapy to get healed completely from her high libido issues. Rena, on the other hand, realized that she couldn't have Daniel and that she had done so much harm to her friend. Ada, she decided to seek forgiveness. She begged Ada to please forgive her, saying she was so sorry, and Ada, with her good heart, forgave Rena, but the friendship could never be like before. Daniel and Ada eventually got married, and her friend Sam was the chief bridesmaid. They were all so happy, and they lived their lives happily ever after. Ada's story teaches us valuable lessons about life, trust, and personal growth. First, it emphasizes the importance of seeking help early when facing challenges. Ignoring or suppressing problems often leads to bigger issues, and reaching out for professional support can pave the way to healing and a better future. It also highlights the need to guard your trust carefully, as not everyone will honor the confidence you place in them. Rena's betrayal shows how destructive jealousy can be, not only to others, but also to oneself. Instead of letting envy consume you, focus on your own journey and work toward your goals. Despite Rena's actions, Ada demonstrated the power of forgiveness, choosing to let go of resentment and move forward, even though their friendship could never be the same. Love and compassion are also central to this story, as Daniel's eventual understanding of Ada's struggles and his willingness to support her through healing reflect what true love entails, standing by someone in their darkest times. Finally, Ada's decision to take responsibility for her life and seek therapy shows the strength of choosing to improve and grow, no matter how difficult the circumstances. This story reminds us to be empathetic, address our struggles with courage, and work toward building a supportive and understanding community. As she opened the carton, a strange smell filled the kitchen. She began washing the meats. Suddenly, her fingers brushed against something hard, a human finger. In the outskirts of a big city stood a grand house, surrounded by a sprawling garden with neatly trimmed hedges and vibrant flowers. A tall iron fence enclosed the property, adding an air of mystery to the already imposing structure. The house belonged to the wealthy Badejo family. They were known for keeping to themselves and were a highly successful couple who owned a chain of luxury boutiques in the city. A teenage girl named Amara, from a small village, started working for the Badejo family 4 months ago. At first, it seemed like a good job. They paid her well, and she had enough to eat, but she was never allowed to leave the house. The workload was heavy, and she often found herself cleaning, cooking, and running errands for long hours without much rest. Despite the workload, she wasn't unhappy, but something always felt off. Mr. Badejo and his wife, Madame Remy, had peculiar habits. They never ate beef, goat meat, chicken, or fish. Instead, they always requested one specific type of meat that Amara couldn't quite identify. It looked like pork, but the texture and color were slightly different. Whenever Amara asked about it, Madame Remy would just brush her off, saying it was a special delicacy from her hometown. Amara tried to ignore her growing unease, convincing herself that it was none of her business. One evening, as she was walking past the study, she overheard Mr. Badejo muttering something about a shipment while Madame Remy hushed him sharply. The tone of their voices sent a chill down her spine, but she quickly walked away, pretending not to have heard anything. Maybe the couple had strange tastes, or maybe it was for health reasons. However, her suspicions were aroused further when she noticed that no one else in the household ate the strange meat. Thunder, the driver, and Moses, the gatekeeper, would always make excuses when offered a plate, saying they had already eaten or weren't hungry. When Amara tried to ask them why, they would look at her with fear in their eyes and tell her to mind her own business. One day, Madame Remy came home with a large carton of the mysterious meat. Amara was instructed to prepare it immediately. As she opened the carton, a strange smell filled the kitchen, different from anything she had encountered before. She began washing the meats, her hands working mechanically as her mind drifted towards her family back home. Suddenly, her fingers brushed against something hard and out of place. Puzzled, Amara pulled the piece out of the water. It was a long, thin bone, unlike anything she had ever seen in meat before. She continued to inspect it, her heart pounding, and then her eyes fell on something that made her gasp and drop the meat on the floor, a human finger. Amara's world tilted, and she staggered back, clutching the sink for support. Her stomach churned and she barely made it to the trash bin before vomiting. She looked back at the meat, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. It can't be true, she thought to herself. Her mind raced. How many times had she cooked this meat? How many times had Mr. and Mrs. Badejo sat at their table, eating with pleasure, while she unknowingly served them human flesh? She felt sickened, guilty, and terrified all at once. What kind of people were they? And, more importantly, what would happen if they found out she knew? Amara knew she had to get out of that house, but escaping was easier said than done. The gates were always locked, and Moses, the gatekeeper, never allowed anyone to leave the house without Mr. or Mrs. Badejo's permission. Tunde, the driver, was equally unfriendly and would not help her, no matter how much she pleaded. Amara felt trapped, like a prisoner in a house filled with dark secrets. For the next few days, Amara tried to act normal, pretending she hadn't seen anything. She did her chores quietly, keeping her head down and avoiding eye contact with anyone. But inside, she was plotting her escape. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, she would tiptoe to the kitchen, trying to find a way out. She thought about climbing over the fence, but it was too high and covered in sharp, broken glass. She considered sneaking out when the gates were briefly opened, but Moses was always watching. The days dragged on, each one filled with fear and anxiety. Amara couldn't sleep, she couldn't eat. She was haunted by nightmares of bones and blood, of Mr. and Mrs. Badajo finding out she knew their secret. She knew she had to get out before it was too late. One morning, as Amara was cleaning the living room, she overheard Madame Remy on a phone call. She was talking in a hushed tone, her voice calm but menacing. "Make sure the delivery is on time," Madame Remy said. "We have guests this weekend, and they are expecting something special." Amara's blood ran cold. Who were these guests, and what did Madame Remy mean by something special? The thought that the Badajos were not just eating human flesh, but possibly serving it to others made Amara's skin crawl. She knew she had to leave that day, no matter the cost. That evening, Amara made her first attempt to escape. She packed a small bag with her most important belongings and waited until the house was quiet. She sneaked down to the back door, hoping to slip past Moses while he was on his usual night rounds. But as soon as she stepped outside, Moses appeared from the shadows. "Where do you think you are going?" he asked. Amara tried to come up with an excuse, but the fear in her voice gave her away. I just wanted some fresh air," she stammered. Moses grabbed her arm roughly. "Get back inside. You know the rules. No one leaves this house." Defeated, Amara returned to her room, tears streaming down her face. She was scared, but she refused to give up. She had to be smart and think of another way. Days went by, and Amara tried to gain Moses' trust, bringing him extra food and helping him with his chores. But Moses remained cold and distant, unwilling to be swayed by her kindness. Then, one fateful afternoon, Amara noticed something that gave her a glimmer of hope. Tunde, the driver, was always careful about locking the car doors when he parked. But on this particular day, he was distracted, talking loudly on his phone as he stepped away. Amara saw that he had left the back door of the car slightly open. A plan formed in her mind. She would hide in the car and wait for Tunde to leave the compound. It was risky, but it was her only chance. She quickly packed her bags again, making sure the bag was small and light. When the time was right, she slipped into the back seat, crouching down and pulling a blanket over herself to stay hidden. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest as she lay still, every beat echoing in her ears. The faint hum of the car engine and the occasional creak of the vehicle added to her mounting tension as she prayed that no one would find her. Minutes felt like hours, and just when she thought she couldn't bear the suspense any longer, Tunde returned. He started the engine and drove towards the gates. Amara held her breath as Moses opened the gate, letting the car out. For the first time in months, Amara felt a surge of hope, but her relief was short-lived. Tun stopped at a nearby market where he usually ran errands for the Badejos. Amara knew she had to get out before Tunde noticed her, so she quietly slipped out of the car and blended into the crowd. She didn't stop running until she was far away from the market, where the air was thick with the aroma of spices, the chatter of vendors, and the clatter of carts. The vibrant stalls selling fruits and textiles blurred past her as she pushed her way through the crowd, her heart pounding with urgency. Her legs were aching and her lungs were burning. Amara found her way to the nearest police station, shaking as she told the officers everything she had seen. At first, they were skeptical, finding it hard to believe that such a respected couple could involve themselves in something as horrific as that. but Amara's fear and sincerity were impossible to ignore. They launched an investigation, and what they discovered shocked the entire city. Madame Remy had been part of a black market ring that trafficked human organs and meat. The strange meat she brought home was sourced from illegal slaughterhouses run by a network of criminals. The police raided the Badajos' home, uncovering evidence that linked them to the gruesome trade. Mr. and Mrs. Bajo were arrested, and their dark secrets were exposed. Amara's bravery in coming forward helped save countless lives and brought justice to those who had been exploited by the sinister ring. She found a safe place to stay and started a new job far away from the horrors she had escaped. Though the memories would always haunt her, she knew she had done something great. Mr. and Mrs. Badajo spent the rest of their lives in jail. And that was how the story of Amara, the brave girl, ended. The moral of this story is this: never ignore your instincts. When something feels wrong, even if it's hidden behind a facade of wealth and respectability, the truth may be hard to face, but it's always better to confront it than to live in fear and ignorance. Your courage to speak out can make a difference, not just for yourself, but for others who are trapped in dangerous situations. Trust your gut and don't be afraid to seek help when you need it. Thank you all for your incredible support and encouragement. Your love and trust inspire us to continue sharing meaningful stories and spreading positivity. Together, let's keep uplifting one another and creating a ripple of inspiration. Wishing everyone happiness, success, and the courage to shine in your own unique way. If you were told to keep your wedding low and simple, would you follow the advice, or would you want to please your mother and have an elaborate wedding? Sophia adjusted her wedding veil nervously as her mother fussed over her appearance, occasionally pausing to fix the intricate beads on the veil. The house was filled with chatter of relatives and the rhythmic drumming of traditional music coming from the courtyard. The air was thick with the scent of jollof rice and fried meats, and the yard was decorated with bright flowers and colorful fabric. Sophia's heart was heavy, despite the day being her wedding day. Smile, my dear. This is the happiest day of your life, her mother said, patting Sophia's cheek with a proud grin. Sophia forced a smile but couldn't shake the memory of her pastor's warning. Pastor Mark had told her during a counseling session, "Sophia, I felt led to tell you to keep your wedding simple. There is a reason for this caution, though I don't fully understand yet," Pastor Mark said to her. She had shared the warning with her mother, but her mother had waved it off. "Pastors will always say something to keep the cost low," her mother said, "but this is my only daughter. I must let the world know how proud I am of you. Besides, God will protect you and Michael. Nothing will go wrong." Her phone buzzed on the bed beside her, and when she picked it up, she saw it was a message from Pastor Mark. "Sophia, I have prayed about your wedding severally. Please keep it simple. God is warning you against making it elaborate." Sophia sighed, her heart heavy with conflict. Pastor Mark had been like a second father to her, guiding her spiritually since her teenage years. She trusted him completely, but her mother's words from earlier that day echoed in her mind. "Sophia," her mother said firmly, "I don't care what anyone says. You are my only daughter, and this wedding will be one for the books. Do you know how many people doubted I could raise you alone after your father died? This is my chance to prove them wrong." "Mom," Sophia replied, hesitant. Pastor Mark said, "Forget what Pastor Mark said." Mrs. Helen snapped, "Is Pastor Mark going to feed us? Is he going to pay your bride price?" I have spent my entire life working for this day. Please don't ruin it for me. Sophia had reluctantly agreed, even though a small voice in her heart begged her to stand her ground. The wedding day was a big and pompous ceremony. The church was decorated in bright colors, and a large crowd filled the pews, many holding small fans to fight off the heat of the packed space. Sophia looked radiant in her gown as she walked down the aisle with Michael, her husband, to be at her side. During the reception, guests flooded the dance floor, spraying money on the newlyweds as they danced. Sophia's mother beamed with pride, shouting instructions to the caterers and ensuring everyone was served. From a corner of the hall, Nana Ruth, Sophia's grandmother, watched silently. Her sharp eyes followed Sophia's every move. She approached the dance floor with a bundle of crisp new notes in her hand. God bless your home, my darling granddaughter, Nana Ruth said, as she sprinkled the money over Sophia's head. Sophia shivered slightly when her grandmother's hand brushed her forehead, but she quickly dismissed the feeling, attributing it to nerves. Michael noticed. "Are you okay?" he whispered. "I'm fine," Sophia replied, forcing a smile. Later that evening, as the guests began to leave, Sophia noticed her grandmother again, sitting alone and muttering softly to herself. "Grandma, are you all right?" Sophia asked, kneeling beside her. Her grandmother looked up sharply, her eyes cold and calculating. "Yes, I am fine. Go and enjoy your night, my darling." 3 months after the wedding, Sophia received shocking news. Her once thriving clothes business had burnt down. The news came as a devastating shock. "Sophia, your shop is on fire," a neighbor screamed over the phone. "What?" Sophia exclaimed, grabbing a bag and rushing out of the house. When she arrived at the market, the scene was chaos. Flames consumed her shop, and firefighters struggled to contain the blaze. The charred remains of mannequins and fabric rolls littered the ground, a heartbreaking sight for Sophia. She fell to her knees, watching helplessly as years of hard work turned to ashes. Michael arrived moments later and pulled her into his arms. "We will get through this, my darling," he whispered, though his voice was trembling. 2 days later, they sat in their small living room, discussing their next step. "I don't understand how this happened," Sophia said, her voice shaking. "I always turn off everything before leaving." "Maybe it was an electrical fault," Michael suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. "But why now? Why me? Why us?" Sophia asked, frustration mounting. As they tried to recover from the loss, Michael was summoned to his manager's office one afternoon. "Michael, Mr. Peters," his manager began, handing him a file. "There is a problem with the accounts. Several transactions are unaccounted for, and your name is linked to them." Michael's heart sank. "Sir, I didn't authorize any of these transactions." "There must be a mistake. Mistake or not, the board is taking this seriously," Mr. Peters said. "You will need to cooperate with the investigation." A week later, Michael was arrested on charges of embezzlement. Sophia was at home when she received a call from the police. "Your husband has been arrested," the officer informed her. "Arrested? For what?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling. "Fraud. You will need to come to the station, ma'am, to get the full details of the crime." Sophia felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath her feet. She immediately called her mother. "Mother, Michael has been arrested, she cried. What? Arrested for what? Arrested for what? Her mother asked, her voice filled with shock. They are accusing my husband of fraud, but I know he's innocent, Sophia said. Her mother sighed deeply. We need to pray, Sophia. The devil is at work. Sophia and Michael sold their home to secure his bail, moving into a cramped apartment in a rundown neighborhood. The apartment was a far cry from the comfortable home Sophia and Michael once called their own. As they stepped inside, the stale smell of dampness greeted them. The walls were cracked, the paint peeling in patches, and cobwebs clung to the corners of the ceiling. A single bare light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a dim, flickering light over the room. The only furniture they had managed to bring was their mattress, a battered wooden chair, and a few cooking utensils. Sophia set the small bag she was carrying on the floor and looked around, her chest tightening with overwhelming grief. Is this really where we are going to live, Michael? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael closed the door behind him and leaned against it, his shoulders slumping in defeat. It's all we can afford right now, Sophia. At least we have a roof over our heads. Sophia noticed a small puddle of water near the kitchen sink, likely caused by a leaking pipe, but she said nothing. She sank to the floor, covering her face with her hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she sobbed uncontrollably. How did we end up here? Everything was going so well. Why is this happening to us? Michael knelt beside her and wrapped his arms around her. His voice broke as he tried to comfort her. I don't know, my darling. I don't know why all of this is happening. But I promise you, we will get through this. God hasn't forgotten us. Sophia glanced at their faded wedding photo resting on the edge of the mattress, a painful reminder of what they had lost. Hasn't he? Sophia cried, pulling away to look at him. Her eyes were red and swollen. We have lost everything, Michael, my shop, your job, our house. We don't even have enough money to eat properly. Why would God let this happen? Michael was silent for a moment, his own tears falling freely. Maybe it's a test. He finally said, maybe God wants us to trust him, even in our darkest times. Sophia shook her head, burying her face in her hands again. I don't know if I have the strength to keep trusting God, Michael. I am so tired. Michael sat beside her on the cold, bare floor and held her tightly. Then lean on me, Sophia. When you are tired, I will be strong for us. We will pray, and we will keep believing. One day, this storm will pass. They sat in silence, holding on to each other as the weight of their reality pressed on them. Life in the cramped apartment was a daily struggle, with Michael still unemployed and Sophia unable to restart her business. They were forced to buy food on credit from neighborhood stores. Most days, they could only afford one meal, and even that was usually a simple dish of rice or beans. Sophia kept a small diary where she wrote down daily expenses and debts, hoping to maintain some semblance of control. That evening, as they lay on the mattress in the corner of the room, Sophia turned to Michael. Do you think this is our fault? Do you think we did something to deserve this? Michael stared at the ceiling, his face illuminated by the faint moonlight streaming through the window. I don't know, Sophia, but I don't think God is punishing us. Maybe there is something we are supposed to learn from all of this. Sophia sighed. I just want things to go back to the way they used to be. I miss our home. I miss the peace we had. Michael pulled her close, kissing her forehead gently. "We will find that peace again, Sophia. I don't know when or how, but I believe God that we will. Just hold on a little longer." As the days turned into weeks, the couple clung to their faith, even as their situation grew more dire. Sophia began to wake up early in the morning to help her neighbors with house chores in exchange for small tokens of food or money. Michael took on odd jobs, from washing cars to helping at construction sites. One day, as Sophia returned from scrubbing laundry for her neighbor, she collapsed on the floor, exhausted and frustrated. The sunburn on her arms from working outdoors only added to her discomfort. "God, why?" she cried aloud, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you allowing us to suffer like this? Have you allowing us to suffer like this? Have you forgotten us completely?" Michael rushed to her side, lifting her off the floor. "Don't say that, Sophia. God hasn't forgotten us. We are still alive, aren't we? That means there is still hope." "But for how long, Michael?" Sophia whispered, her voice broken. "How long can we keep living like this?" Michael hugged her tightly, whispering words of comfort, even though his own faith wavered. Together, they knelt on the cold floor and prayed, pouring out their hearts to God, begging for His mercies. Their voices echoed in the empty room, a desperate plea for deliverance. As they prayed, a faint breeze blew through the cracked window, carrying with it a glimmer of hope they couldn't yet see. Despite all these struggles, they were still battling infertility. One evening, as they sat in their living room, Michael broke the silence. "Sophia, I now feel like something spiritual is behind all of this." "What do you mean?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "Think about it." Michael said, "Everything started after our wedding. It's like we were cursed on our wedding day." Sophia shivered and instinctively rubbed her arms, though the room wasn't cold. "Do you think it's true? Could someone have done something to us?" "I don't know," Michael replied, "but we need to find out." Their search for answers led them to Pastor Mark. During a special prayer session, he called them forward and began to pray. Suddenly, he stopped and looked at Sophia. "Sophia, your troubles began on your wedding day," he said. "Someone sprayed you with cursed money." Sophia gasped. "Cursed money? Who would do such a thing?" Pastor Mark's expression was grave. "I told you not to have an elaborate wedding, didn't I? It was someone close to your family. Someone who's to your family, someone who harbored envy and bitterness for years. Let us pray for further clarity." As the prayer continued, Sophia's mind raced. Memories of her wedding day flooded back. The way her grandmother had stared at her, the way people had sprayed her with money, the gifts she received, the chill she felt when people's hands brushed over her forehead. She also remembered the odd way her grandmother had lingered by the gift table, almost as if inspecting every item that was brought forward. Could it be my grandmother? Could it be my mother's sister? Sophia whispered to herself. Michael noticed her pale face. "What is it, Sophia? I am trying to think of who it could be. Is it my grandmother?" she said hesitantly. "You remember she was acting strange on that day, and she never liked my mother. She always favored my uncles and their families. Could she be the one?" Pastor Mark looked at her and nodded. "It's possible, but we need to confirm it through prayer. God will reveal the truth." The prayers continued for days, each session uncovering more. Finally, the truth was revealed. Nana Ruth, Sophia's grandmother,